When I was a kid, at 3, I saw a probably 16 millimeter black, version of the 1936 movie, and it just stunned me. It occurred to me about 1990,
and I really felt I wanted to tell the story about first frontier American hero in a very romantic relationship with a woman set against these massive political conflicts.
It's not as I imagined it would be, thinking of it in Boston.
The frontier is the only land available to people. Out here, they're beholden to none.
I thought all our colonial scouts were in the militia.
I ain't your scout. We sure ain't in no damn militia.
If you imagine a war that's rolling across your landscape with many different sides and many different alliances, that is what the summer of 1757 was.
And I wanted to see if I couldn't make these people live as real human beings.
The book isn't that accurate. It actually is a gross oversimplification and almost a childish idea of noble savages and Indians who aren't competent stewards of their land, and therefore it's much better that Euro-Americans own all of their lands. The reality was a lot different. As a professor at a university level, I was just astounded at how little people know about the native people of this country. It's just not told. It's just not in your books, just not there. But I suppose if you're going to be taking something away from somebody, it's not a good idea to personify them in any good light. But it's a disservice to the nation, to the people. They should know, just how dependent they were and how much they owe to native people of this country.
There was nothing simple and monosyllabic about the Indian cultures that these people were dealing with. The Mohawks, for example, were extremely complex. They had had 150 years of dealing with the Europeans and dealt with them very successfully. They played France off against England very adroitly. In 1757, they probably controlled 75% of the world's fur trade as both merchants of fur, middlemen for other Indian tribes, and also trappers.
My father's people say that at the birth of the sun and of his brother the moon, their mother died. So the sun gave to the earth her body from which was to spring all life. And he drew forth from her breast the stars. And stars he threw into the night sky to remind him of her soul.
1757, the French and the English, they were battling over the control of the Canadian border, the St. Lawrence Seaway, and the St. Lawrence River, and the entrance into the Great Lakes. So at the time, the Hurons were allied with the French. And the French used the Hurons just as the English used the Iroquois, and the Iroquois used the English, and the Hurons used the French. The Iroquois particularly were the dominant military and commercial force on the northwestern frontier, and their hegemony stretched from everything north of New York City all the way across the Great Lakes.
There was something in the first few pages, the family working together, running through the forest, hunting on foot, and the way in which Michael had described that. That's what really kept drawing me back to it over and over again. It's the artistic commitment of Daniel and my left foot that tells me this is the guy.
I think every time Daniel read, he was finding something in the character. And I also think Michael, you got the feeling that they were learning about one another. You could sense their relationship. You could see how close they were getting.
trying to capture the quintessence of being Hawkeye, having all the skill sets. Daniel Boone acquired all these. Daniel Boone could go off in the wilderness for himself 8-9 months and hunt, trap, be warm, have 3 meals a day by himself in the wilderness.
He takes on the physicality of the character. He went through all of this training, I think, in Alabama, survival training. I used to watch him go for long runs with his gun strapped to his back. And he drank what he used to call cement for this movie because he had to build up so much.
I don't mind doing anything. My body doesn't like it. My body doesn't put on muscle. So it also involved eating vast amounts of food, which for me was also a difficult thing.
So I found a Special Forces colonel at Fort Bragg who taught survival to pilots if they got shot down about how to get out of some forest that you might find yourself in. And he's using the same methods that Euro-Americans acquired from the Indians exactly in this period.
Michael says to me, I have a great actor. I've already acquired him for this film. I know he is the person that I need, but I also know that he has absolutely no experience. He's never fired weapons. He's the son of a poet. So I need you to engross him into those learned skills that this individual would have as an outdoorsman, a frontiersman, and a person of that time period.
You split your wood where the grain is open. See, we've got some split. See how we split it over there?
We went to Special Operations Center, and for us, they designed a course which involved also unarmed combat and a lot of weapons.
Wherever your eyes are at, that's where your muzzle should be, too. Because if you see him, you can shoot him.
Taught him how to use the M16, shotguns, handguns. And as we got him into all these contemporary skills, we were ultimately preparing him for that time when we would progress him backwards.
All we want to do is make a little bird nest, please.
Yeah, there was a guy who basically lives in the 18th century. I mean, way beyond being a reenactor. That is his life. And he knew everything about trapping at that time, about fire building, about cooking, about skinning animals. There was nothing he didn't know about in connection with that world. And when we met him, he was in perfect frontiers dress of that period.
Hand-to-hand combat with edged weapons. That was the nature of war, and came up with the idea of getting an 18th century saber fighting manual, because the blows and the parries with the saber are very similar to a tomahawk.
One move leads to another. It's like in boxing, it's the 1-2-3 punch. You don't want just one move, you want it to be a combination or a series to where you can accomplish the objective, which usually is to render the assailant incapable of any further assault. For instance, in the knife fight, the vessels are on the inside. On the inside at the wrist, to take a serious strike here, you maybe have 1.5 minutes. Underneath the arm in a major artery, a half a minute. If it gets you on the carotid artery, less. You're going to pass out in just a few seconds.
They found the fastest loader of a black powder weapon on the run, because when I saw that detail in the script, I thought, well, that just is not possible to load a black powder rifle on the run. You just can't do that. But there is, of course, somebody who can do it really, really well.
It is intimidating to be in the forest when you're hunting and realizing you have one shot, because it might take a skilled rifleman 1 minute to reload. So you're only going to get one shot, and if you miss that deer, you may starve to death.
If you're living in a very hostile environment, you have no choice but to deal with practicalities first and foremost. That has to be built into your experience from a very, very early age. Otherwise, you will fail and die in those places.
Tracking became a big thing with us. You're tracking animals, tracking people. What you're reading from a hoof print that's in mud that is hard. You know, if it's hard and it's still well formed and defined, wind erosion hasn't tipped over the edges, so it's probably fresh. If it's well formed, then this deer went on this path when it was wet, and then it dried. And you remember it rained yesterday, so this deer came through here yesterday.
The work that we did, I was grateful for it. I needed it. And Michael and I together were able to explore a way of life which was real to those people at that time. So I think it comes through the details of discovering a way of life.
I could see him changing into that person daily as we would move forward, as he absorbed these different talents and skills. I remember on his last day of training, he fired the weapon, continually striking the bullseye.
It either has to be necessary psychological background, or it's because it delivers Daniel Day-Lewis to a place where there's no question of confidence. He is Hawkeye. He could do everything Hawkeye could do.
There's no wasted experience. If in the discovery of it, you're becoming at ease with it. Finally, it's all about being at ease with the life that you have.
In every gesture, in every moment in which Hawkeye is in conflict or repose, how he stands, all of this is manifest. Then comes the second layer, which are what are your values, what are your mores, how do you view the material world, how do you view the sky, how do you view the land, how do you view real estate. In the culture that Hawkeye's a personification of, you don't own land any more than you own the sky. So you guys get down to the water. It's gonna be very smoky in here.
The anthropology has to be done almost through the back door. And somehow you have to learn them through subjective channels, if that makes sense.
All right, here we go. And action!
He just creates a world and he lives in it. And so whether he's running or making love or whatever it is he's doing, he's in that character, I think, body and soul.
The only thing on film that's finally important is whether some moments of truth are achieved. But those moments can only really be achieved through a certain kind of anarchy of the spirit, I suppose.
I think that Daniel is very smart, that he likes to not necessarily reveal his process. We never discussed the scenes heavily. I don't think he wanted to engage in a discussion because I think he was incredibly respectful to Michael. Michael was very much the general, and Daniel was his soldier. And Daniel understood that chain of command.